Foster care changes lives, but what does it really take to create a safe and supportive home for kids in need? Today we sit down with Miss Enid Jones to talk about the impact of foster care, the challenges, and the incredible stories of resilience and hope.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, Enid.
Thank you for having me.
And as always, I'm Dylan.
I'm Hilton.
George.
And I'm Enid.
And she's Enid. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what you do, who you are.
All right. So I'm Enid Jones. I'm here with Central Texas Table of Grace, and we are an emergency foster care shelter. We serve school-age children, and so that means from kindergarten to high school seniors. And we also have a program called 365, Grace 365. It's for kids that age out of foster care. That means they were never adopted. But when you turn 18 in the state of Texas, you are officially on your own. As of your 18th birthday, you no longer have someone that's helping you with housing or clothing or food or anything else. So we have a program where we rent out apartments in the Round Rock area, and we provide them with an apartment, furniture, a monthly stipend. We help them get their documents if they aged out without them. We help them get their driver's license, GED, whatever they need. And within 2 years, give them the resources and things they need to be independent. So right now we currently, I don't know if I just said that already, but 13 kids is what we can have at the shelter. But we are launching our capital campaign this year to build a custom shelter where we can host up to 25 children and then have up to 20 young adults as well. So it's going to be significantly bigger and better. So we're excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Well, I know Enid for a little while now. How long have we known each other?
3 years almost.
3 years almost, yes.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful what you do.
Thank
So I really support that. And I've actually posted on my Instagram and, quite a few times about Central Texas Table of Grace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great organization. And I think, as I was just asking you before, there's 40,000 children that need support, they are in the foster care program in the state of Texas. That is a huge amount of kids.
A lot of kids. If
Yeah.
anybody's been to the Q2 stadium, the children in foster care would max out capacity that stadium by themselves. No caseworkers, no parents, just the kids. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Wouldn't it be awesome if they did like, oh, let's do a game only for the kids in foster, and then they put everybody together there?
That
Because that would be
would
a
be-
great showcase.
It would be amazing. And actually Q2 Stadium has been a supporter of us. We got a amazing grant from them to help with our technology. And I mean, Austin is an incredible community with big hearts. So we're super grateful for their support. But yeah, the more that people can do, I mean, there's still a lot of people that just don't really fully understand foster care. And I mean, I've had some people say, oh yeah, I've watched the movie Annie. And I'm like, that is not even close to reality, but good for you. It is a great movie. But I mean, you hear stories about kids moving with trash bags, and that is true. We get kids all the time. They arrive with just a few things in a trash bag. They had only 5 minutes, if that, to go grab things before their caseworker just swooped them up and brought them to us or to their foster placement. So one of the things that we do is we make sure that every kid leaves with a suitcase and not with trash bags or ratty boxes. We want kids to move with dignity when they leave our facility.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see George already wanting to ask a question.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions for sure. I don't want to, decide everything is going to be said here. So the first thing is, as you mentioned, people have no idea what it is. People heard about, they take their impressions for 3 pages they read in a book, or the friend of a neighbor who went through this, but they're too far away from that. We all live in bubbles.
yes,
We have
do.
no idea what difficulty is in life, like hardship is. First of all, since I'm not educated in the topic, who decides for the laws regarding that? What kind of law regulates the fostering process?
So in America, every state has their own laws. So each state has a different way of how they handle kids in care. So in Texas, it's called the Department of Family Services, DFPS, and they're the ones that kind of manage the laws that Texas has in place. But just like everything else, I mean, you take it to your local government and you vote on people, that put these laws and regulations, same as your school board. So yeah, we have to follow those laws as a shelter or as a licensed foster home, which I am also a licensed foster parent. So I know both worlds, the business side of the shelter, but also in my personal home. So, and there's different rules for both, but similar.
You mentioned about the state, it's been a state law. Have you worked in different states to be able to compare, or you exchange information with other states so you can check how it works? I'm very
curious. I really like it.
All right.
So I have fostered, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing in the state of Ohio. I was basically kinship placement, which kinship is a broad statement. It means that you are family, but sometimes if you just know the child, have an established relationship with them, you are considered kinship. So a teacher could be considered kinship to a child because she's got an established relationship, or he has established over the course of several months with a child. So they could be considered a kinship placement. So I was considered kinship to a group of teenagers in Ohio, and they stayed with us for a short time. And it just kind of got that started in my heart that I wanted to do something like that later. And when I moved to Texas, I really decided to go all in after meeting a friend that was in the world of foster care. So I don't really know specific laws of different states, but I did adopt here in Texas just recently. Back in November, I adopted a 16-year-old boy that was at our shelter. And I did learn some state laws of Colorado, which is where he has family. And because of the red tape between the states and their different rules and expectations, he was not able to be placed with the aunt that wanted him. But the states could not agree that she was going to be sufficient enough for his care. My personal opinion, he would have been fine. But it wasn't possible. So after 2 years of trying to find family, we decided to go ahead and just adopt. And he was happy to just have normalcy and stability. So that's about the extent of cross-state laws that I know. Is not a lot, but.
All right. Thank you. Actually, the other question was regarding your motivation. What motivated you to do that? Right.
So growing up, I grew up in a very disruptive home. My father was very abusive and alcoholic. We moved all over the state running from him, but then my mom would return. And I remember being about 11 years old. I remember thinking, if I can survive my youth, if I can get to being an adult, I want to look back and I want to be able to help kids that are in my situation. Because I felt very invisible. I felt very like nobody could really help us and nobody really cared. And so I wanted to be someone who cared and who really like could do something. And that was just in my heart for years. I mean, even when I was like dating my husband, I'm like, so how do you feel about, foster care? And, because I was already thinking like, maybe we'll adopt. And he was like, oh, I love kids. I would love to have a bunch of kids. And, and so anyways, we ended up only having 2 biological children, and then we adopted the 16-year-old. So
cool.
Yeah, that's my drive. That's my heart, is just, I know what these kids are living through, and I want them to feel seen and heard and safe.
I have one question. What is your position in the company in Central Texas?
So I've had multiple titles, as typical in the nonprofit world. I started with photography and marketing, social media. But then because of my experience with BNI, I was already working for Table of Grace, but I was still in BNI as a photographer and social media strategist. And I was like, I was already feeling like I want to do this nonprofit full time. And so I brought it to Stacy and I said, hey, what do you think about this? What if when my term ends, I just renew as the nonprofit? She was like, that sounds great. We were in the same chapter together. And I go, so that would probably mean that I have to move to another chapter, which I'm happy to do. But, I just wanted to make sure you were good with it. She's like, I think it would be a great idea, because nonprofits can have a free chair for the first year. And she's like, what is there to lose? Like, BNI is amazing. And why not? Let's see where it goes. So I started doing networking on behalf of the nonprofit after my year ended as a photographer in social media. And turns out I'm really good at it, not trying to be arrogant, but I really love networking and I love connecting with people. I love connecting people to each other. And I love storytelling, which is what photographers and social media people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's transitioned. I no longer do the social media and photography so much for Table of Grace, just sometimes, but now I'm fully really fundraising and similar to what Stacy does, just trying to fund and support the organization developing.
Yeah, just put in perspective, BNI, which I'm part of, and I'm in the leadership of our chapter right now, and they decided to do this, like giving the first year for free to a non-profit, and every single year the leadership votes if we're going to continue doing that or not. And then this year, we put up to vote again, between the three leaders, and it's like, no, yeah, we can afford having
Oh my gosh.
in it, just it being a free chair again. So we did that again.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's
so
amazing.
yeah, so
I did not know that before coming here. So
yeah,
that's-
so
Ah.
so yeah, this year, and of course the new leadership renewal is going to be October, and that's up to them, to
Right.
to do.
I need
so.
to make sure I make good friends.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Start lobbying.
I'm already good friends with everybody in there, so it's good. I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's funny because networking is it's very important in every single industry, right?
It is.
And I also love networking, and I do that a lot.
You're very good at it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm good at it, apparently.
Hit the flex.
Flex, the
Yeah, the
voice,
flex.
the hair, the beard. I mean, it's so good.
But yes, I think it's interesting that our organization like BNI, which is the biggest in the world in networking, allowed they pay the first year, right?
Yeah.
And then it's up to the chapters now to say, hey, everybody gets together and then we do it. So of course there are some chapters they don't collect enough money, so they will have to charge for a nonprofit to stay on. But yeah, we felt like we don't have to. And then when we pass it over, we will always be putting the word out like, hey, our chapter it's wealthy enough to be able to continue supporting. So
It's incredible. It's
Yeah.
so amazing. And it means a lot to me because being a business is hard, and I did that for 7 years in BNI, right? I was in business for myself for over 10 years, but 7 years doing it with BNI. But as a nonprofit, the challenge is people think, well, what else other than money are you asking for? Like, how do you do this? And I go, well, it's not just about money, but it's about sharing. It's about sharing a story. It's about inviting people to community, right? It's about giving back. And I am just as much of a value to a company by bringing something that is important and valuable to the place where they do business, just as much as they are to me financially, volunteers, doing community service. It's a mutual relationship. And I think every part of that is needed in a community to be successful and to thrive. And I feel like if your community isn't giving back, then it's going to die. You have to feed your people. You have to take care of where you live. So I think our chapter is just such a shining light of what that looks like. So
That's
I'm grateful.
cool. That's cool.
Probably a broad question. You mentioned, people's idea of foster care and watching the movie Annie. Are there any other kind of misconceptions that you deal with people asking questions
That
and
is a
not
good
really
question.
fully understanding?
Yes, I get a lot of people saying, I can't believe people don't want their kids. I'm going to try not to get emotional, but it's actually a lot of parents love their kids. For example, we had one kid come to our shelter, and the mom loved her kids, and she was working so hard to get them back. The abuser was the father. He was in jail. Now it was up to her to try to get her kids back, and she did everything to get her kids back. And we were just so excited for her. We were rooting for her. And she went to a doctor's appointment one day, and on is it George Bush Highway? Is that right?
Endow it?
No, here. No. Anyway, I'm saying it wrong. But the point is, she was hit by a semi and she died.
Oh my God.
And these kids have no other family in the state of Texas. And here comes that whole like red tape of state to state, right? Their mom that loved them dearly was doing everything to get them back, has an accident and dies. And now these kids are left alone, and no one that can no one that can take them. Okay? Again, not because there isn't family that loves them and wants them, but one relative was overseas in the military, can't take two children. Another family is taking care of their elderly parents in another state, couldn't take them either. A lot of times the issue is financial burdens. Families just can't afford to take them in, and there's not enough support and resources. But that is a big misconception. These kids do have family that love them, do have parents that love them. There are just other obstacles and reasons why they continue to have to stay in care. And the reasons are vast and often very heartbreaking.
We're mentioning this red tape from state to state. Do you feel like sometimes, obviously laws are put into place for protection, ultimately, but sometimes do they kind of hinder and get in the way of what seems like could be a better result for the child and the family?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So, I mean, I don't know. How many of you have siblings?
All of us.
All of us.
All
Yeah.
of you? Did anybody share a bedroom with a sibling?
Yeah.
At least one sibling?
Yeah.
Did anybody share a bed with a sibling at some point?
No.
I haven't.
No,
But
I did.
Yeah.
So me and my sisters shared a queen size bed. Me and my two sisters, a queen size bed until at least I was like 12 years old or something. And that worked. I mean, we never had a lot. We were poor. We were like I said, we were in and out of shelters. We were on the run, but we did what we had to, right? And I really, in the end, even though life was really hard, I'm really grateful that we stayed together, that I was never separated from my sisters or my mom. But for example, the child that could have been reunited to family in Colorado, the biggest issue was that they told that family, you need to get a bigger house. So they did. They got a bigger house. But they still had to share bedrooms. So the parents had their youngest in their bedroom. The other three littles shared a bedroom. Their sister and their kid lived in the bedroom. But Isaac could not have his own bedroom. And so they were like, you're going to have a bigger house because he needs to have his own bedroom. And they're like, we can't afford bigger. Like, we've already maxed out our budget to get this house. And now you're saying we have to get a bigger house and we can't afford it. And I mean, he would have just been sharing a bedroom with the little cousins. In my opinion, not a big deal. Or maybe shared a bedroom with his aunt. Again, not ideal, but not unusual, right?
Better than being on the streets.
Better than being on the streets, and he would have been fine. And so I think sometimes our cultural idea of how things should be, I think, gets in the way of these kids being able to reunite with family and have normalcy. It would not have been unusual for him to have lived in that house. with that family.
And actually, having said that, would potentially teach them. Well, they probably already know that and already used to that, but it would reinforce them the respect to others because they're sharing a room,
Mhm.
and also not only respect the others like the space, right, but also organization, because
Yes.
they would have to be organized, because if they're messy, they're actually being messy to somebody else as well.
Right.
And I say that because I did live in London for 5.5 months on a hostel, and they're like three, those double beds are like one on top of another. So because I was like learning English when I moved to England, so instead of like renting a house, we lived in a hostel, like paying by the week,
Mhm.
and sharing the room with people that you don't even know. And
Yeah.
that taught us like, hey, it is a mini fridge. Do you know those mini fridge?
Yeah.
They have like 3 shelves. So in the room you'd have that. So let's say the top left shelf is mine, but the right top is somebody else. The mid left is somebody, and the mid right is somebody's, and then the bottom, and it goes like that. So even that organization and not really going into and messing with anybody else's food that are keeping in the fridge, and it's a mini fridge.
That's
So it was
wild.
like a daily supermarket, because like, okay, I'm gonna cook some food today. You don't store that. You go buy and you come and cook.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? So, and then you eat everything because you don't have where to put it.
Right.
Because we're living in a hostel, because of the cheaper way of living in London. And I was paying for everything in my own expenses. Even though my dad could afford, but I did not ask my dad to pay, because no. And I'm living, I saved money for these, and I'm living on my own means until I find a job and whatnot. And it actually reinforces and teaches, how to be organized and respectful of somebody else's belongs and space.
Absolutely.
So it's not a bad thing.
It's not. And it is more normal than people think. And really, when you look at the whole world, it is absolutely more normal than even in American culture for you to share spaces with family and extended family. So I think that is a big flaw in the system. But in the system's eyes, they didn't want to put this child in a position where the family would be so burdened that he would end up back in the system in a different state. So in their mind, they're like, having that extra bedroom like is more secure. But
Yeah, because it was like a overstate kind of, yeah. Okay. They'll be like away from their family, like their aunt that they're talking about. Yes, I see that.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like a defensive, like preventative mentality versus then what could actually benefit the child.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing.
It is tricky. Yeah. And there's good people. That's another hard. I think there's good people on both ends trying to do the right thing, and the reality is that the best is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But trying to bring people together to like organize or agree, right, compromise is difficult, just like any other area in politics or life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look, I know there are levels and levels for this kind of conversation. It's an intrinsically counterintuitive to most of us because we grew up with families, we grew up, with entourage, entourage around us, But how do you vet the families because there's a lot of traumas going on there, it's very common to find mental disorders also
Mhm.
among them, more because of the traumas, because of the abuse. What is basically how do you vet, because I know, like, to foster my 2 cats, I had to fill out an application of 150 questions. I had to talk to the foster family. I had to talk to Austin Pets Alive twice. They told me it doesn't matter how bad you are, how the kind of hardship you're gonna have it. Are you sure you're gonna keep the You're gonna keep the cats? 1 month later, they called us to make sure everything was all right. The vaccinations. I mean, it was a 45 days. I would say 50 days process. So how do you manage all these mental disorders, these traumas? And I know it's a complex question, but this is one of the
So,
things I'm curious about.
so I'll do my best and I'll use your example of fostering. So I'm a licensed foster parent. So as far as like, what does it look like to get licensed as a foster parent in the state of Texas? So in Texas, we have different agencies that train parents and license them. You could also get licensed through the state themselves. That's the easiest because they are so spread thin. They're not really going to do much more than do a background check, have you take a couple of online courses, and then you're certified. You can have the kids. But there's also different layers of payment or reimbursement that you can get for helping to take care of these kids. If you get licensed through the state, that is the lowest pay because it's the lowest amount of training and the lowest entry point, right? If you go through an agency, you can get licensed to take care of a child that is considered to be moderate, which means, or basic, which is like normal kid, no health issues, no emotional, like big emotional deals, no medications, stuff like that, basic level kid. Then there's moderate, specialized, and severe. And you can get licensed for each level. My home was licensed for specialized. And so because you're not going to find a basic level teenager, and I knew that we wanted to foster teenagers and they're not. Every teenager is at least moderate, specialized, or severe. So I wanted to make sure that I could be prepared for a teenager. So we went through the agency called DePelchin, and they're based out of Houston, Texas. They're the most established. It took us about 3.5 months to go through all of their classes, background checks, fingerprints, everybody in the house, including my biological children, because they were over the age of 15. They had to be background checked, fingerprinted. They had to be CPR and first aid certified. So did we. We have to have our house inspected for fire, HVAC, electrical. Our dogs we had to make sure we had them vaccinated and approved and clean and clear. There's a long list of checks that you have to go through. Then once you get to the point of being licensed, your home is now considered property of the state. So you are a state facility at that point. So they can come at any time and inspect. They can do surprise visits. They can do announced visits. It could be daytime, nighttime, whenever. And they will look at everything. You can't have expired food in your home. Your food can't be touching the ground. Like all these different kinds of things. You can't have too many dirty dishes on your counter. It has to look fairly clean, right? So all the things. So it is a challenge depending on what level of care you want to do and also what age group you want to take care of. But that's kind of the gist of what it looks like to be licensed.
I think I would fail.
Listen, and when people are like, "Oh my gosh, I have to have a clean house," and I'm not Mary Poppins by any means. Like, I'm not great at housekeeping, but we were good enough. And so, if you ever come to my house, I always tell people it's lived in. Okay, it's lived in clean. Like, there's dog hair. There's always going to be some dirty dishes, but you're not going to see roaches, and it's not filthy. So.
Yeah, that's the same. My house, it's not gonna have roaches and stuff. But yeah, right now I need, and like when I get home tonight, I gotta do the dishes because I think it's a little accumulated.
A couple days worth, maybe. Yeah, or at least the big stuff got left a couple days.
Are you considering becoming a licensed foster?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Well,
I'm happy to help Enid.
I love that. And I have a really good friend, and she runs an organization called Austin Angels here in Austin. She's the founder and CEO. And something that she says often is not everyone is called to foster, but everyone can do something to impact the life of a child. And fostering is hard. But everyone can do something. And so I appreciate people that are willing to just be cheerleaders and give meals and financially support families. Like I said, everybody is needed. It takes a village.
Are we bombarding you too much with questions?
No,
No.
I can do that. I can do this all day.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't want to look. I don't want to sound silly here.
No.
Okay. So, since you spoke about difficulties, right? Could you tell me a little bit about the stigmas these kids and the parents also suffer in the process? Just just to illustrate, because many people probably out there considering, but they don't do that because of the stigma.
Oh yeah. So, a lot of people think that these kids are going to be like mentally unstable, scary. Oh, they're, if I bring them into my house and I have kids, what if they rape my kids? What if they stab my children? What if they light my house on fire? And I'm not going to lie, some of those thoughts crossed my mind, because I was a terrible teenager. Like I was terrible. And I'm like, I might have done something crazy, right? If I had been put in a foster home and, I took people's cars and I smoked weed and I was involved in theft, like I did those things. And so I'm like, those things are possible. But none of that, I mean, the abuse, the stabbing, the fighting, will they light my house on fire? Like none of that has happened to us or anybody I know. And really these kids are just like any other kids. They want to be seen, they want to be loved, they want to be supported, they want to be understood, right? They love their families and they don't want to necessarily believe like me or do life exactly like me or eat the exact foods that I like, but they're just normal kids. When you see them at school, like if you went to Round Rock High School, I 100% know you would never know which one of those kids was in foster care, but they are there and they're not worse than their peers. What is worse is their circumstances and maybe the things that they've lived through. But when they're with their peers, they are just like everybody else. And they want the same things. They want the cool clothes. They want to have the good haircuts. They want to have the nice shoes, right? Or the video games or the phone. They want a nice iPhone. It is the same thing. And
they want to be normal.
They want to be normal. And that's a word, right? In foster care, normalcy. Kids want normalcy. And that is the biggest thing. And so for the kids that have come into my home, right now, the child that we adopted, he's a Pacific Islander. And he likes different foods than we do. And but what's the same? Him and my son eat exactly the same. They don't like vegetables. They like cheese. They like meat. They like hamburgers, right? So, but the difference is Isaac also likes Spam. We did not eat Spam at all, ever. And now I love Spam. And I have learned how to make meals with Spam that I would have never had thought to try if I didn't have this Pacific Islander in my home that was like, I really want some fried Spam with my eggs. Like, and I was like, okay, yeah, okay, let's try it.
Dylan never had Spam.
I've never had Spam. I'm not opposed to trying, but I've never had it.
Let me tell you what, it's actually pretty good.
I believe it.
We'll have to do that sometime. Maybe that's the next, there'll be a little side dish of Spam.
I'll do it.
Yeah. But that is one of the big things. Like when we were getting licensed to foster, people are like, aren't you afraid? These kids, like when we brought a teen boy, when he came into our home, my daughter, he was 15. My daughter was 16 and my son was 17. So they were like, aren't you nervous he's going to hurt your daughter? And I was like, he could try, but she's kind of feisty.
Yeah.
It's like, but never. It was the complete opposite. He was so protective. I remember one time we were walking through a parking lot and it was dark, and we had gotten off to like use the restroom at a restaurant in the middle of nowhere. It was like literally the only spot to stop. And my daughter just was making a beeline to the bathroom. She wasn't paying attention to where she was going. And he runs up ahead of her because he noticed a car was going to pull out and hit her. And he ran up and pushed her out of the way so that she wouldn't get hit by the car. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even see that. And he did. And another time we were in a parking lot and I went in for a doctor's appointment, and my daughter and him were in the car alone. And I was walking up to the car just to get in, and he was laying down in the back. But he saw that someone was approaching the car and was going to open it, and he popped up and was ready to fight.
Oh, wow.
And my daughter's just sitting there scrolling on her phone. Didn't even realize anybody was approaching the car, but he was ready, like, to defend her, right? And I was like, it's been the complete opposite of what people were so worried about with me fostering and bringing a boy into the home. He's been amazing. So,
Are there like instructions on a protocol or guideline on how they should answer in case other kids bullying them because of the situation, because of this condition, or technically other people don't know about it? Or like your classmates or friends, you know?
oh, so
I'm
you're not supposed to like announce,
all right.
you know, that kids are in care. So even like the teachers sometimes won't know what students are in foster care. There will be staff at the school in the administrative level that will know who they are. And in Round Rock ISD, there's a program called FIT. And those women in the office are in charge of knowing exactly who's in foster care. They will go and meet with the kids, but they don't have anything that makes it obvious, like, we're here for you because you're foster care.
Yes.
But they are there to be a resource and a support to them. And they've been amazing. They've partnered with our kids from the shelter and with me personally, and they're making an effort to be more well known for the parents and the, you know, people that are helping care for the kids. But again, it's very, as far as the kids are concerned, we try to keep them as normal as possible and not announce that they're in care or make it aware. And that, yeah.
I grew up around here in Leander. And I actually went to Rouse High School in Leander ISD. But I had a friend that I met freshman year, and he didn't tell me till I think we were junior year. We never really hung out outside of school, but he was in foster care. You would have never known.
You would never know.
There was no telltale signs. He had a nicer phone than I did.
Yeah.
And he wasn't... I don't know what he was battling on the day-to-day, but he never came across as a person that was battling stuff, depressed or anything. Just a normal kid, just like me. And he just happened to be telling a story about coming from one foster home to another and his experience with it, and I never even knew.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's how it should be. It shouldn't be a big talking point. If they want to talk about it, by all means. But it's not something that should separate you from everybody else because of your homing situation.
Right.
And I think schools, definitely in the modern day, they do a good job about that. They don't single people out.
No, usually they don't. And I mean, I've heard some stories where some smaller districts do, or don't have things in place that really protect the kids as good, but very few. For the most part, I would say that the kids are given the ability to be normal and fit in. So, and that's encouraged.
Well, I think we know kids in general have less of a filter.
Yeah.
So you don't want to create any sort of stigma, you know.
Mm-mm.
But you would never know. And that's any situation. You don't know if they might not even be in a foster home, but they go home and they have abusive parents. Or there's so many things that don't get talked about, and you would just never know all the weight that children carry on their shoulders on the day-to-day. And it's, as you get older and you think about those things, it's kind of crazy. When you're young, all you care about is, I got clothes, I got food, I want to go hang out with my friends. Mm-hmm. You're not really compassionate, and that's a generalized statement. Some kids are, but you're not really worried about what's going on in other people's lives.
And when they are actually at school, they have their time with their friends, with the teacher, the people they look up to, right?
Mhm.
And I like the Round Rock ISD, and I think the other ISD is the same way. It's very, kind of high standards.
Yeah.
Like, for example, my daughter, because she speaks two different languages, so she does all the English, tests a little slower. So they put her out to give her like an extra hour to do things because she speaks two languages, right?
Right.
And so they do that in a way that is so easy for her, and they cater for that. They don't cater for like being a foster or something. Like if they are going through like, okay, so on the English, she needs an extra time. They will give that extra time,
Mhm.
just because she's bilingual, and it may in her head may get a little confusion here and there. Uh, but that's the thing that I like about the Round Rock ISD, because they really cater individually for every single student.
Yeah.
And at the time that they are at the school, the kids, they want to be able to perform, they want to be able to hang out, and if they are having some trouble at home, actually being at school is a time that is the most normal for them, because they are equal like everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's a good statement that Dylan put it out there, because that's what it is. It's being on that same boat as everybody else.
Yeah. And actually, like, a lot of kids that experience foster care and trauma, early childhood trauma, a lot of them are set back um, developmentally, but also in education, because, if there was abuse in the home or a lack of food or resources, they end up missing a lot of school, either because they were sick or they were hurt or, whatever. And so the schools do make accommodations for kids if they need them. And I'm very grateful, because a lot of our kids have been able to really thrive at Round Rock ISD, because they do such a good job of making those accommodations, but making it very normal. And it doesn't feel like you're being singled out or like you're slow or, whatever. It feels very empowering and supportive. So but we live in a really, like I said, Austin area is incredible. We're very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know how ethical it is to talk about that, and I don't know if you can, but are there any demographics breakdown, man, like boys, girls, or some other conditions, other different demographics that you have in mind that it's more common?
Common to go into foster care?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So statistically, there are more African American children in foster care than any other uh, color or race. And I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of those African American communities are just not very supported financially. There's not a lot of resources, a lot of help, a lot of support. And that's really unfortunate. There's not enough support for single moms. But also, there's a lot of older kids that get left in the system. Again, I think because people are scared of taking in an older child, or they just feel like there's no way I could handle a teenager, and so their siblings will get placed. Sometimes families pick and choose who they want, and then these older kids get left behind because they're too hard or they're just too scary. And even worse is the boys. It's like, if you're a teen boy in foster care, you're probably going to age out and end up in jail. The statistics are terrible. You're going to be homeless, addicted to drugs, in jail, and just feed back into the system. And it's really heartbreaking, which is, yeah, it just breaks my heart to see teen boys, and knowing, like, especially if they have to leave our shelter and their caseworker doesn't have a better place for them to go. I'm like, I'm going to hear about this kid later, and it's not going to be good. And we've seen that multiple times in my 3 years at Table of Grace, and it's really heartbreaking.
That's very sad. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were good boys. Like, if I had enough room in my home, I would have taken every single one of those boys.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just an ideas. You toss in ideas. So there is an opportunity here, for sure, that from the government especially because I think I am in favor of smaller government, but for those cases, that's exactly what I think the government should work, because no one, if you treat the government as business, these kids are scrap.
Yeah.
These kids will be scrap. That's the problem. Oh yeah, you should treat the government as the as you treat a company. You can never do that. I never say anything to anyone who says that because I know it's just a stunt, it's just a way to say things. But that's why I believe that there should be more programs considering 17-year-olds. Like you could call 17 or something like this, because that's the year.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, we just regular, you think even more. Think about the kid who's 17 years old and 300 days. Think about the next 2 months.
Yeah.
What goes towards their minds, their minds, like in 2 months, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anything. So definitely, Kobe Bryant created a program in California,
Mm-hmm.
which is not exactly fostering, but he figured out that a large portion of student athletes would leave when they are 12. So he created a company called 12, right? So which is to try to prevent those kids to leave the sport, because if you leave sport, you get into drugs,
Yep.
you're pregnant, So I think there should be probably a program when they are 17, and then
Is
to
there
embrace
such a
these people.
program? Do you know?
I mean, there's some small organizations that try to fill those gaps, like our Grace 365 program, but really it's more downstream. The problem is before they get to that point. And so I think the solution is just having people willing to just if you have the room in your heart and in your home, give these kids a chance, or volunteer. That's how I started. I started working for Table of Grace, not direct care with the kids, but just for the love of the work. I was like, I'm going to volunteer at the shelter. And so I was working for Table of Grace, but I was volunteering with the kids, and I would go and I would cook meals and I would play games and bring treats and just have a good evening with them. And I'm like, I fell in love with them. I love these kids. And I'm like, I would have probably never taken in the kids that I did if I hadn't just gotten to know them and seen they're just like my biological kids, and they're desperate for love and attention. And so if you don't feel ready to open up your home, then maybe volunteer. And it's as simple as coming and making hamburgers and playing kickball or gaga ball or cards with the kids, and just do that consistently. And even that is something healthy. But there is a story that I heard of these two boys they were both 17. They were about to age out of foster care. They both had multiple moves within the system. They didn't know each other, but very similar stories, very similar abuse, very similar circumstances, over 20 moves in the system, never adopted. One boy was adopted on his 17 and a half by someone. So he got to go, placed in a home, had everything he needed, the support to connect to the resources he needed, started to develop that family and relationship with these people. And he went on to live a very successful life, start a business, and is doing really well. The other boy aged out. But on the day that he aged out, he went on a walk. He just had his bag of things, was told, you're on your own. So he left, started walking, and decided to jump off of a bridge, got hit by a semi. He committed suicide because he had no hope.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm alone. I have been in the system my whole life. Nobody wants me. I'm trash. This is all I have, is this bag of trash. Took his life. 2 17-year-old boys.
Very different outcome.
Very different outcomes. And that story was told by a judge here in Travis County. And I had the honor and the privilege of meeting him this past weekend. And he knew those two boys. It's real boys here in Texas. And that happens more often than is told. It's very heartbreaking.
It is.
I have a QR code that I put on the top of this screen for you to donate to Central Texas Table of Grace. And I hope you do. With that, let's wrap up today's episode. Thank you, Enid, for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.